First, though, I wanted to let you all hear. I'm sure none of you are interested in hearing what's going on in Cortex. That's so many good things. But I wanted to introduce Dennis Lauer from Cortex to tell us just a few things about the district and some of the things that we've been hearing about. Dennis?
Thank you, Ann, and welcome everyone to Cortex 1. So if I was to say to you what is Cortex, we probably would have a lot of blank stares and probably 5 different answers as to what Cortex is. So let me tell you from my perspective what Cortex is. Cortex is a building. It's this building. It's called Cortex 1. Cortex is a district, a narrowly defined district that you see here outlined on this board. But Cortex Innovation Community, which is our rebranded name, is much more than a building. It's much more than a district. It really embraces the entire community. Right now, we think about the Cortex Innovation Community being the Midtown area. That includes our academic institutions, our cultural institutions in the Grand Center, Forest Park, the zoo, our academic institutions, our neighborhoods, all of this that creates a 24/7 live, work, learn, play environment. We are trying to expand the concept of what a knowledge community is. For us to be successful, we have to create an environment where people want to come early and stay late, and where people can live as well as work, where people can dine, where people can go to recreation centers or fitness centers, where people can pick up their laundry, everything that's necessary to create a vibrant community. Leveraging the assets of our academic institutions, the pipeline technology, all of those kinds of things. Some of you may have heard that last week the Brookings Institution in Washington released a monograph, a study that was 18 months in the development, called The Rise of Innovation Communities, the New Economic Realities Globally. And Cortex was featured very prominently in that. And the move back to the urban core, not just in the United States but worldwide, is a phenomenon that's having profound impacts on the way that cities are redeveloping themselves with a knowledge worker base and with the traditional institutions within the city. So that monograph that came out last week really begins to define the new economic realities that are beginning to shape globally the technology communities and the way that cities and regions compete with each other. So we're pleased to be part of that, and having been showcased in it, we're pleased to be part of that. And I'm thrilled that you're here today to talk and listen to and talk and dialogue about the concept of a one city, of a one region being St. Louis, because that's something that from the time that I came here 4 years ago, I pitched from day one in being here. I can only compete globally when I talk about St. Louis. When I pick people up at the airport and bring them in from the airport, and I come down 170, and they look over to Clayton, and they say, oh, that's the downtown. And I say, well, no, that's not the downtown. And then I get to Midtown, they say, oh, this is the downtown. No, that's not the downtown. Downtown's down there. And I found myself kind of creating these lines of demarcation all the way through the region. And I realized these are artificial things that we create for ourselves. And when people outside of St. Louis, particularly the ones that I deal with, we were just on a recruiting trip to Israel a couple weeks ago. St. Louis to them means something entirely different than it means to us living here. So when I'm recruiting and interpreting, I'm interpreting St. Louis and all of the assets of the region. The corporate assets that are in the city, the corporate assets that are outside of the city, the academic institutions that are in the city, the academic institutions that are outside the city, the workforce that's in the city, the workforce that's in the county. All of that together is a one St. Louis, and that's the way that I have to interpret what we're doing in developing the Cortex Innovation Community. So today we are kind of focused on the Midtown area, but I could see ourselves in 5 years or 10 years really delimiting this and talking about the St. Louis Innovation Community. One of the striking things when you go to Silicon Valley is that you realize it's more than 40 miles long. And it starts south now of San Jose and goes all the way to San Francisco. And it's filled with technology companies. 45 miles of technology-related companies and infrastructure to support it. I can imagine very easily 10, 15 miles, 20 miles filled up with technology companies as one region. That's where we need to get. That's where we need to be. That's how we compete with Silicon Valley. That's how we can compete with Boston and Cambridge. That's how we compete globally as a region. So I'm thrilled to invite you here today to hear more about this. We've been a proponent from the beginning, and we need to stand together as a region so we can lift everybody in the region and we can compete successfully. So welcome, glad you're here.
Good afternoon. Thanks for letting us come and speak together. And this is Marcus Johnson. He's the coordinator of community-based studies at Better Together. And for those of you wondering what a community-based study is, we'll get to that shortly. It's kind of a big part of how we're going about doing things. But I think the opportunity to talk to the Missouri Growth Association is very important for all of us, because when you take all our effort, all of our research, and everything and put it together, that's really what the goal is for our region, is how do we grow? How do we expand? How do we compete globally? Because it is a regional effort at this point. So what are some things we can look at to see how we're doing them now, what we could possibly do moving forward, and talk about those scenarios and put those out there for further discussion. I'm just going to give kind of a broad overview of how we started and what our focus is, and then I'll let Mario touch more on the day-to-day aspects of the study. But Better Together was formed by the Missouri Council for a Better Economy because there's big numbers behind a lot of our operations in the regions for municipal services. So over $2 billion a year is spent on municipal service delivery in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. It's a lot of money. 1.6 billion of that comes from tax revenues each year. Other comes from different fees and things like that. So if you're a family of four, that's roughly over $5,000 that you're paying towards these services. So that's a significant chunk of money, and in aggregate, it's very much a lot of money. And so when you have a region of 1.3 million people spending that much money, and it's a very fragmented region compared to just about any other region throughout the country, you start to ask questions: are we doing things efficiently? Do we do things better? And that's really what this study is about. It's, we hope, going to provide the basis for a conversation moving forward, and an educated one. Since 1876, when the city and the county split, this conversation's been taking place. But now we think that in order for people to actually have a meaningful discussion, convince one another, and not have just such a basic emotional response because they like where they live or work and keep that way, and understand that economic development in St. Louis doesn't have to mean us competing against ourselves, but competing properly against other regions, and that's really how the international economy and the global economy works now. So to do that, we're looking at 6 basic levels of service. We're looking at public finance, which was our first study, and for that we just aggregated all the documents on financials, organizational charts, certified financial documents with their budgets. Put all those together, put them in a chart, put them in a database so that people could readily search those. And that information, while we could obtain it, took about 2 months to do. And that's time that your average business owner or citizen does not have to do that. Now you can go and you could search a popular one, red light cameras, and see who's has red light cameras, what kind of revenue they're getting, what kind of those sorts of things, just to see how different municipalities are operating, but more importantly in our focus, how we're operating as a region to pay for our citizens. And then we moved on to economic development, which we recently completed. With that one, and with all of these, we have a committee for this stuff. And early on, the committee directed us towards different resources and groups, and they, along with those groups and individuals, really started to focus in on a few topics. The maze for regulation and getting licenses and things like that. How we use economic development tools. A focus was on TIFs. And then third, kind of workforce and how we do that in terms of standards across the region and how our fragmented nature affects all of this. And all of those are available on our website. All of our studies, every source material, every fact that we found, every figure we cite to, we footnote, we provide the source material for it so that people can check us, because we think this is laying the groundwork for future conversations about how we should go forward as a region. With that, Marius will kind of talk about a little bit more of the day-to-day, how we get into that, the future studies that we have left. We're in the middle of our public health study, and then we have 3 more after that, which are public safety, parks, recreation, and infrastructure, and then we'll close out with administration, which is just the general governance structure of our region.
Great, thanks, Dave. I will keep my remarks brief because I'm sure you all have a lot of questions and would like to know some things from us, and so I think our time is probably better spent addressing some of your questions and concerns maybe about this topic. But as Dave was mentioning, we have 115 different governments in St. Louis City and County delivering municipal level services. So that includes 90 municipalities in St. Louis County, 23 fire districts, and also the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County. It's a lot of governments. And so you can imagine from an outsider's perspective, that's pretty intimidating to come to this region and understand how to navigate those different governments and those different entities. And so what we're trying to do is understand how we as a region, as Dave mentioned, deliver municipal services. And we've decided that, based on what we know about government, those 6 areas that you talked about as study areas, and they're listed sequentially in the brochures that you have, are where we're going to be focusing our efforts. By the way, those 115 governments don't include things like water service, libraries, schools, anything like that. So if you really think about it, there are probably more. But again, we wanted to keep, for the sake of time and just making sure that our studies had some focus to them, keep it at the level of municipal services. So as he talked about, we really have been doing a lot of outreach just like this to talk with people in the community, because we recognize that any study of this nature has to not only be solid from the data perspective and having accurate and full information about the region, but also have the voices of the individuals who interact on a daily basis with those 115 local governments. And that's really what's behind our effort to make this what we call a community-based study. We need to make sure that in every step of the way, we're doing outreach to individuals like yourselves to understand that, what we see in the spreadsheet may tell us one story, but what you experience in your day-to-day life in trying to get a business started and getting a restaurant open or whatever your experience with your local government might be can vary greatly. And more importantly, what we found as we started to talk with people during our economic development study and in our public health study now is that a lot of times people have experiences that they think are sort of one-off experiences. Well, I had a frustrating time getting my business license in this community, or I ran up against roadblock X or Y. But as you start to listen to people and talk to them about their experiences, those are pretty common themes across the region. And so it points to some issues that we need to address as a region, and we need to understand if we're really thinking about growing our economy and being competitive on a global stage. municipality or what have you, but really it's a systemic issue. The way that we do tax increment financing, for instance, in the state of Missouri, Missouri is one of only 2 states that both allows for access to sales tax revenue versus just only property tax revenue, and only has 1 level of approval required for that TIF district.
Which is the municipal level.
Which is the municipality. And the reality of the situation is, so if you have a municipality with a 6-member board, and 4 of them say, yes, we approve this TIF district, the TIF commission may say, no, we don't recommend doing this, but it takes a 2/3 majority of that city council to approve or override that recommendation. Well, that same 4 votes that initially got the TIF approved is going to be the same 4 votes needed to override it. So when you look at it, it's a system where people are really, municipalities are pitted against each other. They're thinking about the best interests of their citizens, which is their job, but the way that the system is structured is not conducive to facilitating regional growth and regional progress. And so what we need to be thinking about is implementing giving a tax commission that has stronger teeth, and making sure that there is some body that's at the regional level or at the state level that is required to make sure that we're approving these things rather than being solely left to the discretion of the community.
And with TDDs, CIDs, we provide an overview of those and how they've been used in some of the components as well. TIPS, I think, became more of an issue because it was just more of a concern and a topic for people to have to talk to. But I think it highlights really a larger thing, and that's what TVs, with TIPS especially. I mean, this is, I think we all agree, a pretty good use of TIPS for our region. And it was really just
Cortex we highlight Cortex as an example of a good TIP.
But it really highlights the fact that it's not necessarily black and white, everything's good or bad, but the emphasis should be on viewing things and how we do them as a region, and adjusting our view of what growth is from maybe a block-by-block, municipality perspective to what the rest of the world is now using in terms of growth, which is regional growth. And so our examination of those economic development incentives is really meant to kind of highlight that as well.
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess one transportation development tax I just popped up in my mind was the Joe Edwards trolley tax from the Delmar Loop to a little forest purging. And my understanding is there's some businesses that voted in the business that's still there, and some businesses the tax is new to them, and they have not voted in the business. And as of right now, while there's been some pavement changes to Delmar and the Bolivar, the trolley has yet to come. I would like to ask what do you foresee what's happening to a transportation tax development like that? Shall there be a unification in the city and county? And 2, do you have any other requirements, what's going to take to complete it, or if that project's not complete, shall the businesses get their money back?
That question is probably a little in the weeds for us, just in terms of us not looking at, we examine TDDs, CIDs, and TIFs, and really wanted to look at how we use them. So we didn't dive deep into every single one of those.
Okay.
So for me to comment on that, I would be guessing. I think a lot of people would, so I'm not even sure how the mechanics of that work, if they moved in after and we're kind of just grandfathered into that, or what the impact would be. But that's a little bit in the weeds for us in terms of one specific project.
I honestly, I would love to be able to know the answer. I just honestly don't know.
Okay, that's okay. That's gone.
Intimately enough to.
So I'm just reading over your brochure here, and those are several of us that are here deal with companies moving to within the same vicinity that are coming to St. Louis from other areas, and a couple of attributes of this community that they wrestle with that I don't see on your list are transportation, specifically airport, but mass transit, and those to put all under transportation and education. Two kind of issues that if you've got a company and you're trying to promote growth and you're trying to convince people this is a great place to be, that as a community you think you have to have a unified approach to. I'm curious whether your study will compare what we have in those other elements and maybe they pop up in this part of your list here. But compared to good traffic to, for instance, Indianapolis that as you know, or some other communities that approach it.
So for us, with 115 governments, we maintain them to municipalities, city, county, and fire districts because they provide municipal service. So while we're not gonna, if those areas come into the 6 study areas, we'll address them. For example, with some of the economic development incentives, those affect funding, for example, so we address that. But in terms of specifically discussing education, in transportation, I think we'll touch upon a little bit in infrastructure and parks and recreation, because that, and touch upon a little bit in some of our economic development materials, just in terms of, this, you know, I know a metro stop, or, you know, where businesses are located around us, things like that is very important, especially when people are moving in. So we'll touch on that, but in terms of actually having a study just on transportation or education, we know mostly because education is a state issue for us, and it's more outside of the municipal level of service, for example. And then with transportation, it's such a massive undertaking that we're going to touch on it in the traditional spheres where it pops up, but that's probably even subject for another whole entire study. And for us, the topics in here don't encompass and provide the, you know, magic pill that cures the region, but there's 6 that we felt we could measure ourselves against other regions, really look at best practices and find some improvement.
Yeah, and I think the decision was made at the onset of this project by our board that we, as you can imagine, this kind of study can get into a lot of different topics and sort of get unwieldy very quickly. And so the decision was made to look at the delivery of services at the municipal level, which unfortunately don't include school districts, their own political subdivision or transportation. And so in an effort to make sure that we get something done and get some good work done on looking at the way municipalities deliver services and services delivered at that level, they decided that those were not 2 areas that we wanted to be looked at. That's not to say that they're not important. We know that education in particular is one that's central to everyone's mind as they decide where they move, particularly if you have young children or are thinking of starting a family. But we also don't want to pretend that, you know, looking at these issues and thinking about what our structure, our larger governmental structure will look like in the future is going to be a panacea, or the thing that automatically changes the way our region is viewed or the way our region operates, but we do think it will be something that will really help in thinking about our long-term future and how we want to position ourselves on the global stage.
Study that you're doing reminds me of an organization that used to exist that's now merged into focus called Confluence, and they had a regional approach to a lot of topics, whether it was education or transportation. Sounds like you've got an piece with these 6 topics. So my question is, did Confluence tackle this issue about 115 municipalities and consolidation? And secondly, what is the time frame for your study, and what's the next action? So you've got the study that decides what
Right.
to do, so what are you going to do?
Right. Well, and I'll kind of answer in reverse order. The reason that we're doing the study in this community-based approach is to, A, avoid the traditional have a consultant fly in and meet with, for 2 weeks with the mayor, the county executive, some business and community leaders briefly, and then file a report on that. So we think that through this approach, by meeting, doing outreach, our committees, all of